This rising threat of radical Islamist terror is a cause for grave concern, not just in India, but across the world. India has been cautioning the world for decades, including cautioning the world about Pakistan's state-sponsored terror. But will the world wake up or continue to walk into one crisis after the other, eyes wide shut? Joining me on India First, Charles Thompson is an Australian journalist. Ray Locker is an author and analyst, joins us from Washington, D.C. Dr. Tara Karta is former director of India's National Security Council Secretariat. Sushant Sareen is senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. And Dr. Vikram Singh is a security affairs analyst and former DGP of the Uttar Pradesh Police. Charles Thompson, two shooters accounted for. Some reports seem to indicate a wider conspiracy, a suspected third shooter or someone who was aiding them, and more suspects. Any more details in public domain about the motive and whether there was a larger plot?
Okay, your voice is coming through crackly, but I think I've got the gist of what you're saying. I hope I'm clear and articulate to you. The issue here is that things can't go on. If we are we're a multicultural nation, many people are coming to our country, but there has to be certain rules, principles, and restrictions done. The current Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, and Home Minister have been given warning about this. They chose to ignore it. In fact, they blew the flames because they allowed large protest marches in Sydney by the Palestinians against the Jewish community. Now, my heart goes out also to the Palestinians in Palestine. I understand, but when you have something in a foreign country trying to allow it to go on our shores is just unacceptable. Now, what we hope for is not just for a few more rules, but there will have to be a dramatic change in how we deal with religious violence. There's just no other way to deal with this. And the problem is that many Australians now have lost faith in the current Prime Minister.
Oh, that's a big point you're raising. So I'll come to the politics of it in just a moment. But before I throw it open for a wider discussion, the older shooter, if you can hear me, was Sajid Akram. He'd lived in Australia since 1998 when he apparently came on a student visa. His son Naveed was born in Australia. Any details of what prompted them to kill innocent people on a beach?
Well, the first question is, we get many people coming on student visas and they put in dodgy applications and they get approved. So we all know this and they go to dodgy colleges. But the sad part about this is, and we all have to reflect as Australians on this, the son was born in Australia and therefore he was coached and led to this path. And we don't know yet, he did go to one institution. I'm not going to name it because we have to give them the benefit of the doubt for now. But an investigation is now happening about why the son, who's born in Australia, has such violent views against another community. And we just can't take this lying down anymore. There has to be, and the blame lies with our Prime Minister, our Foreign Minister, and our Home Minister. Our police, our intelligence services have been doing a marvelous job before and after. Warnings have been given, but the Prime Minister took no heed. And now he's responsible for what's happened. And unfortunately, everything I've heard from him now doesn't sound like a leader. He's got to come out and be absolutely steadfast. Now, another problem that we have in Australia is that after COVID, too many people at once were allowed in, causing all sorts of problems and aggregating. Because this is not just an issue of just one religion. This is an issue of when you bring in new people from different beliefs, different backgrounds, different religions, we all have to learn to live together.
But some may not want to coexist. And, India has dealt with that problem of Pakistan state-sponsored radical Islamist terror. Some reports seem to indicate, and you can shed more light, that these two suspected terrorists are, at least one of them is of Pakistani origin, the father. The son, as you pointed out, was born in Australia. Any clarity on whether there are other similar modules still at large in Australia?
Okay, your voice is cracking up, but if I got the gist of it, the difficult issue for us is with the country of Pakistan. Now, I have many Pakistani friends in Australia. They're law-abiding and loving citizens, but I don't understand why Pakistanis are involved in everything when terrorism is involved. It just befuddles me and confuses me. So now what has to happen is in future when people are coming from countries where there are genuine acts of terrorism happening in their country, just like there was happening between the Palestinians and the Israelis, we suddenly allowed a whole lot of people to come in very quickly. Now, this doesn't bring confidence to the general public. The government has to become more firm and
Okay.
follow the rule of law a lot more precisely.
Stay with me. There's a very interesting point you said. You have good Pakistani friends, but you're also surprised whenever there's terror, there is a Pakistani link or words to that effect. So, Shant Sareen, this is the worst terror attack in Australia in 30 years. The youngest victim was only 10. The oldest managed to survive Holocaust in Nazi Germany, but could not survive a radical Islamist terror attack. The threat is huge in Australia. What are you picking up?
Gaurav, the threat is not just huge in Australia, it's huge all over the world. Australia is just the latest victim, or this particular attack is just the latest manifestation of a threat that most other societies around the world face, including some Islamic societies. I think I should mention that. But I think in many Islamic societies, especially in places like UAE and others, they are not confused about the phenomena of jihad. They understand it. I'm afraid to some extent in India, but definitely in the Western countries, there is a complete and utter lack of understanding of the phenomena of jihad, how it kind of invades the mind, what kind of mindsets it gives rise to. We were hearing the gentleman from Australia who says that he's really surprised, how somebody who was born in Australia could be thinking like that. We've seen any number of examples of people who were born in France or in Belgium or in Canada or in the United States making a beeline for organizations like the ISIS or Al Qaeda or some of these other groups. So this is a phenomena people need to start understanding, and in the interest of political correctness, or
Yes,
because they are afraid that they will be labeled Islamophobic or racist or what have you, any of the other slurs which are generally hurled on people who are ready to talk the truth and point out to the reality of the matter. Uh, because if you're going to be scared of being labeled such and you're not going to do something about it, then I'm afraid these are incidents that will continue to follow. Secondly, I think in places like Australia, very correctly put, there has been a kind of a two-tier kind of a policy on how to deal with the rising anti-Semitism, which was very visible to everybody in Australia. Not just anti-Semitism, anti-Hinduism. So, for example, a
yes.
lot of the acts that have taken place against the Jews, we have seen Hindu temples being attacked. We have seen Hindu congregations being attacked. We have seen, vandalism around Hindu places of worship. All kinds of things we have seen. Have you seen any action by the Australian authorities? In Canada, in Australia, even in the United States, they've covered it up
Yes.
under freedom of speech and expression. The FBI suddenly seems to come to a complete halt, completely paralyzed when it comes to attacks on Hindus, for example. They probably still
That's
act
a
against
very
on.
interesting point to raise. Let me bring in Ray Locker. Let me bring in Ray Locker on this, for a perspective from Washington, D.C. The threat that is posed by radical Islamist terror, Australia is bleeding now. India has bled for decades. Washington, D.C., New York, the United States has bled. And yet, Ray Locker, do you agree that there is skepticism or fear or apprehension in going after the perpetrators of terror? Sushant Sareen says there's fear that you will be labeled as an Islamophobe if you call out terror. Is that also your understanding?
Look, I've been reporting on this for more than 30 years. Did stories when I worked in Florida about a group of Palestinian connected terrorists working out of the University of South Florida. My reporters and I worked with were called Islamophobes then. It happens now. I mean, that's kind of the go-to thing when you identify people who are Islamic, who are engaged in Islamic-based terrorism. And it's not to make a blanket assumption about any Muslim. Fact
Of course.
is, inside that religious group, there are people who find solace in jihadist ideology, and then they act upon it. And one of the ways you stop it is to work with religious leaders in any community to help you tell you who are the people who are causing trouble. Because in a lot of cases, those folks are known. They're involved in the mosque community. People know that guy's a troublemaker. It seems like spying on people, but that's one way you keep track of people who might be a possible threat. And so, that happens. It's unfortunate. Look, just like there are white people who belong to Christian churches who act out upon, they kill black people or they do other attacks. It happens in every community. Now it's very glaring because it involves Muslims in the Pakistani community in Australia. It just happens in a lot of places. What makes me nervous is we have really kind of crippled our intelligence agencies in the United States. We fired a whole bunch of FBI people who are good, who are experts on this, because they're following, the directives of our current president. So, there are a lot of ways that you can stop this, and we need to be vigilant on all fronts.
Oh, absolutely, and not be scared of the cover fire, Dr. Tara Kartha. And I want to bring in Dr. Vikram Singh because he's somebody who's dealt with it on ground. But Dr. Tara Kartha, the cover fire that is given to radical Islamist terror, the moment you call it out, the moment you say that this is what is being preached in a certain mosque or a certain madrasa, you're called an Islamophobe. Now, in Australia, this is just the latest example. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he'd cautioned Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese 4 months ago. And according to him, nothing was done. The actions of the Australian government only encouraged anti-Semitism. You agree, ma'am?
I would absolutely agree. I mean, in terms of numbers, Australia is among the top 10 in terms of Palestinian protests. Now, again, like I said, I'm not saying Palestinians, they have their own issues, they have a problem. We need to recognize that. But there is a line you do not cross. And they crossed that line in Australia several times, and the authorities did nothing. So I think Netanyahu has a very good point here in terms of what Australia could have done to sort of reverse and just say, this is not something you do in your country. I mean, just draw that line and say that, you in any Hindu terror against Hindus, against anyone, not permissible. That's all we're asking the government to do. But Gaurav, I want to bring in one important thing here. See, it's the radicalism which has spread from Pakistan is something also which is overlooked. Many of these, like, someone like Willie Bridget, French national, radicalized in Pakistan. The one in the San Bernardino shooting, which was in the US, which was one of the most horrific attacks, radicalized in Pakistan. A bunch of people in India, Kerala, who went and joined Islamic State and later turned up in Pakistan, radicalized. There are centers in Pakistan which are extremely good at this. They are very, very good they've been doing this for decades. That is something we need to watch out for, because this gentleman was in Australia since 1998. What turned against the state? That's what we need to know.
And Dr. Vikram Singh, Pakistan is notorious. Pakistan is the Oxbridge of terror. While in this case, we are still waiting for an official confirmation about the origins of the terrorist. But when it comes to Pakistan state-sponsored radical Islamist terror, whether it was Osama bin Laden hiding in Abbottabad or the case that you dealt with personally, Daniel Pearl, his killer, Omar Said Sheikh, he was trained in Pakistan. Sir, what more can you tell us? In your views, why is the word apprehensive about nailing Pakistan state-sponsored radical Islamist terror?
Well, Gaurav, you have put $1 billion question and your voice was cracking. What I can comprehend is that the world has to come together to name and shame Pakistan, because it is the epicenter of all terrorist activity. If there is a terrorist action or an incident in Australia, can Pakistan be far behind? You can see how well trained the father and the son are. And to buy 6 weapons for a person who's immigrated to Australia for education and for a better life, there was no reason for them to buy 6 weapons. You see the stance and the firing prowess of the son, Naveed, and you can see that he fired 4 rounds in 4 seconds. And the stance, and you, since you are very keen on arms and ammunition and combat strategies, you'd understand that he took considerable training. It seems would be online or offline or trained by his handlers. I dare say that he had handlers who prompted him to do what he did, the father and son. They had gone there to Australia for a better life. An open society, a magnanimous society welcomed them. And this is what they gave in return, that they shot dead 16 people in cold blood. Well, I would say I had expected, and I totally agree with the indignation of Mr. Charles Thompson, that Australia could have done much better. But we applied band-aid to terminal cancer. We did not do what we expected to do. Whispered sweet nothing, and for what? So that we may not be called racist or Islamophobic. Well, if we are branded Islamophobic or racist, so be it. But terrorism has to be wiped out.
Oh, absolutely. Charles Thompson, do you see that kind of willpower in Australia after this attack to wipe out terror? Or, as Dr. Vikram Singh said, it's like applying Band-Aid on the cancer of terror?
Okay, once again, your voice is cracking, but I think I've got the gist of it. Look, I must tell you, this will profoundly change Australia. Make no doubt, every single person in the country is angry. And they're angry at our own government. And there is no way that things can stay the same. Things will have to change. You see, when we had the last massacre, which was an absolute tragedy also, and that was not to do with religion, that was a crazy guy, we brought in the best and the strongest gun laws in the country, so in the world. And yet, here we have some guy illegally having 6 guns and carrying them around with him. And now we find he's also got bombs in his car. Now, this is extraordinary. This is a complete and utter wake-up call for the whole country. And I can assure you that things will not stay the same now. And our politicians, if they don't listen, they'll be gone. Because I can assure you that over time, Australians are getting very, very angry. We're happy to be multicultural. We love our people, but that doesn't mean the rule of law is not applied to all people under all circumstances. And vetting must be done when people come to an island nation.
Sure. Ray Locker, we saw tremendous anger even in the United States of America post 9/11. The then President George Bush said, you're either with us or against us, and then they got the world to be with them, and naturally so. But the same America is now consorting with a state sponsor of radical Islamist terror like Pakistan. So despite Pakistan being involved in the killing of over 2,000 American soldiers in Afghanistan. So are those lessons not learned? Does America lack institutional memory, or are there other games at play here?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, we've crippled the FBI's counterterrorism ability because we fired so many people, because maybe they were alleged to have been involved in prosecuting Trump for his previous actions as president, like on January 6, 2021. That's not helping. We have blinded ourselves in a lot of ways because we decided that the intelligence community is somehow part of some deep state that's out to do things against Trump. That's a mistake. Cozying up to members of the Pakistani government and people from Pakistan, also a mistake. I mean, we've had their top general here hanging out in the Oval Office, while at the same time we're putting a 50% tariff on Indian goods. It doesn't make any sense. So in this country, we need more stable leadership at the very top, and we need to get people back into places like the FBI and the CIA who know what they're doing and who aren't driven by some kooky ideology that thinks that anybody who's an expert is somehow against the president. That's a problem. And then we got to work with people in various communities to say, look, we support you being here. We want you to live here and enjoy your life. But if you know somebody who's active against the U.S. interest or who wants to kill somebody, you need to tell us. And that takes years to do.
Okay. Sushant Sareen, neither Australia nor Europe and perhaps not even America, they've woken up, to the threat that's posed by this mindset, this radical Islamist mindset. Whether it's Islamic State or Lashkar-e-Taiba or Jaish-e-Mohammed or Al-Qaeda, I mean, they're children of the same radical Islamist mindset. Why is it that the West is not waking up to this threat in your view?
Gaurav, I think one of the fundamental problems in the West is that while they have the scholarship, they will study all the documents, they will document everything. The scholarship is of a very high quality. The problem is that they look at this problem from a Western perspective, from their mindset. They don't put themselves in the minds of the guys whom they are studying. So they don't understand because they think that, look, everybody is the same, everybody is a person like us. Maybe there is something which has, ticked wrongly in their brains and we can fix it. That's not how
Okay.
it works. You have to understand where the motivation of that guy is coming from, and that is where these guys fail to understand it. So, for example, in this particular case, you knew that there was this guy, you were keeping him under watch 5 or 6 years back, right? And
Yes.
then you felt he's a normal guy, he's probably just very reclusive, he's not somebody who socializes, but maybe he's okay, he's not a danger to society. Little realizing that jihadism is like a narcotic, it's like alcoholism. Once it enters your brain, even if you go through rehabilitation, it can trigger off at any point in time. Now, we don't
Okay.
know what the exact circumstances in this father-son duo is, but these are issues which need to be studied far more closely, and people who you suspect of it can never be left unmonitored. I know that's easier said than done, but
Yes.
frankly, don't do it. Then the problem is what you saw 2 days back in Australia.
But Dr. Tara Kartha, because you've studied the subject, Dr. Vikram Singh studied the subject and very extensively. Now we've been suffering this terror for decades. It's not as if it just cropped up last week. I mean, in India, we've been suffering this through the 1980s in Punjab, 1990s in Kashmir, and then rest of our country. We know the world watches this. We're a transparent country, and yet they don't wake up. Why aren't they waking up, and what needs to be done? The last 30 seconds I have on this part of the show, because then I want to come to that charge sheet story, the NIA charge sheet on Pahalgam. But Dr. Tara Kartha, your take on this?
See, in part, it's also our fault. You remember that what was his name? Fahim Khalid Lodi, Australian. He was
Yes.
plotting an attack with Lashkar-e-Taiba. Willie Bridget, Lashkar-e-Taiba, again in Australia. Where have you ever followed up? Have you ever gone out and said, look, our narrative also needs to be strengthened. If I talk about Pakistan, people say, okay, this is an India-Pakistan thing. You need to get it out of that frame. It is not an
Yes.
India-Pakistan thing. This is a worldwide. I think I just saw that map. Oh my God, the number of countries where Pakistanis are involved, either
Yes.
directly or indirectly. And we don't follow up. So we really
Oh,
need
absolutely.
to.
And perhaps, Mr. Thompson and Mr. Locker, in their respective countries, there will be realization that whether it's the Jews who are being targeted or Hindu temples that are being targeted or gurdwaras that are being targeted, the perpetrators remain the same. It's the same ideology. The money flows from the same people. And if they're a threat to Jews and Hindus today, they will be a threat to everyone else who doesn't believe in their ideology tomorrow. And that's a story we'll be tracking very closely. Dr. Vikram Singh, Sushant Sareen, and Dr. Tara Kartha, stay with me. Mr. Locker and Ms. Thompson, many thanks for joining me.